So I'm going to go back to that slide, evidence, analytics, and empathy, and maybe pose a few questions for the panel. I'll start with you. I think the case you made for Akron was that you can do things economically, but with tremendous empathy, and that patient voice in the beginning made your project better. Can you speak to that a little bit, about how using that input from patients and all caregivers early on made for a better hospital?
Yeah, I think one of the successes of that is this was not a design-led project. It was not led by the architectural team. We actually had to shut up and sit down and listen, which is very hard for a design professional. And the caregiving staff, the physicians and nurses, they actually led the scenarios of operational model and design before we were able to jump in and then help them. And then that was in the early phases. Then when we got to the model phase where we were working in full-scale mock-ups, it wasn't all, as I said, an equal ensemble cast. It didn't matter if there was an architect leading, an engineer, a family member. We all shared that leadership in crafting that space and running the scenario tests.
Thank you. And so that's really about co-design, which I know everybody here on the panel speaks a lot about. And on that idea of co-design, Monica, you talked about the politics of place. So talk about how co-designing could help us change that, maybe in...
Yeah, the project I'm working on currently, I kind of went in with my own insight of what potentially could be interesting to explore, and redesigning the hospital room based on the patient. And as I talked with patients and advocates, it turned out in one of the scenarios I found really compelling that it wasn't the patient that felt like the space in his acute care was really that critical. But having the patient advocate there in the room was of utmost priority, and actually at times changed the course of his care, and mistakes were avoided. So for the patient advocate, they had a lot of spatial concerns and issues that weren't being met, and I think just even accommodating them better in the room or making them part of that conversation, allowing them to be there more often, changed the dynamics of the care for the patient. And so I think that becomes a spatial matter.
That's a really good point. The family becomes a patient in many ways too. And so I'm kind of curious, with surgery on the OR, I know the patient goes under the anesthesia, but the family suffers for all those hours, right? And it's a really tough experience for them. So can you speak to that, Alex?
Yeah, I think we can rethink how we design the waiting room to better engage the family in, the experience of waiting. When you talk to families and surgeons, there's a big theme of reassurance around the time of surgery. It's a highly stressful event. And surgeons even feel to some degree like they're that the family is a sort of additional patient of theirs, that they have a responsibility, an actual surgeon-family relationship to ensure that they are taken care of, their anxiety is alleviated, and they're reassured. And so I think that we can take that a step further with the space, not only create comfortable spaces, but spaces where you can be quiet, where you can be together with your family, where you can chat with family members who are at a distance and want updates, and also keep abreast of the surgical procedure if that's what they want.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that when we were talking about the stage analogy, all of us discussed that can we change the role of the patients and the care providers, this entire ensemble cast, to become more actors and directors rather than an audience, because sometimes you feel like that. And Bonku, I think when you were talking about the analytics on one end in the ED and talking about the public health on the other end of the spectrum, perhaps we as a community lack the ability to see that as one continuing conversation that we all have a piece of and we contribute to, but it starts there at home, right? The experience starts at home. So I'd love to know how you're weaving those two worlds together right now and the role space plays in that.
Yeah, like 99% of health happens outside of the hospital.
Right.
And as a provider, we're stuck in this building where patients come to, but then we don't think about, well, what happened to that patient? What was that patient's journey coming in to our hospitals or our clinics, and what happens when they exit and they go back to their homes? And just being able to take a deep dive with some of our patients that we see in our hospital, like Larique, it was incredibly difficult for him. We had to arrange for him to come to one of our classes, and I was on the phone for an hour and a half with ambulance companies or ambulette companies, and I was like, this is ridiculous. How am I going to get him there? And then Rob ended up, my colleague, going to his house, and there was like 2 of them trying to get him down his porch, and it was an obstacle course. And I was like, how does he even do this? This is terrible. But we don't think about that. We think, well, why isn't this patient on time? It's 3 p.m. And this patient's late. Or so for us, it really gives us a deeper empathy for patients when we can get into their story of what life looks like outside of the hospital.
And in my mind, when I was hearing you talk earlier, it struck me that how interesting would it be for the person who's designing that residence or that community to think that if I design it better, he will have fewer visits to your ER, right? I mean, that's the kind of future we want to go for. Now, I'm curious in the audience over here, who has ever thought of the built environment before?
Everybody.
So a few hands. Who's been really, really frustrated with it before? Has anyone who's thought about it not been frustrated with it? But it's interesting that not all the hands went up, and I hope that that's something that we change, because it does become one of the things that's difficult to change. So I'd love to hear again from the panel, and Jeff, you are on the industry side, right? And a lot of this starts from the clients, the healthcare systems thinking about this and giving it the time. So any nuggets of wisdom you have for us?
On change?
On change and on changing this culture of how we design from a client side.
We're really trying to approach it from the client's perspective now, and not from the way that the American Institute of Architects has developed contracts for the last 100 years. So we're, as I said, we're really flipping it on its end, because hospitals don't understand the way we deliver projects and the way contractors work with us and the competitiveness, and that we both run back to our corners and we wrap ourselves in Lego mumbo jumbo. So what we're trying to do is break through all that and spend much more time at the beginning really establishing ground rules of how we're going to deliver a healthcare project. And I'm talking about, this could be a major facility of several 100,000 square feet, or it could be a small renovation. And spending much more time determining, getting all the players together, determining what the operational model is, how we're going to create that desired future state, and then work everything towards that, creating all the way down to details like the scheduling and how we're going to meet that go live date so these guys can operate successfully in there, and get them the product that they need and the value that they want without a bunch of changes at the end. And so if you spend a little more time at the beginning, you're going to typically get a much better outcome at the end. And we've seen that. You just happen to be our researchers, so you're documenting it now.
That is true. I think having evidence and empathy together, that's an amazing combination. You want to have the evidence and you want to have the empathy, so you can balance. And you also use the term future state, which I think is interesting. Almost every single time when you build something new, you don't just build a stage, you have an entire theater. So you do rethink your processes, you do rethink the patient experience, and that state changes completely. So being aware of that makes a lot of difference. Any suggestions? And we do have questions, so I hope we can do Q&A. Do we have a mic in the audience? Oh, perfect.
Thank you. Hi, the projects you're showcasing are quite amazing, but they're all like sort of large-scale hospital-based things. I'm wondering if any or all of you have like really simple, like 3 life hack kind of things that any doctor or small clinic could do tomorrow that could change their clinics for the better and make them more sort of health-centric and kind of fostering a healing environment.
I'd like to say my pet peeve is, you know how MD Anderson with cancer has cancer struck out? I would say we should do that with waiting. Waiting serves no purpose. So let's use those spaces to engage, to empathize with the patient, to give them the knowledge they need to be more prepared. So I think that's a really easy one. Elizabeth, we have an amazing artist in our midst right now who's doing art for waiting rooms. And so I think there are a lot of things we can do with just that piece, because every single healthcare facility has a waiting, and literally in our heads cross off that word. The purpose of that space is not to wait. It's to do something more purposeful with it so that that time is better engaged. My 2 cents.
I had a very sort of thoughtful patient who, pointed out that he thought the back of all doctors' jackets should say, "If you can read this, this visit is free." And so I think as far as just simple hacks for the office, what I always try to do is make sure that I arrange things so that I'm facing my patient and that we both have access to the electronic medical record. I mean, you saw that with Forward, Inc. yesterday, and they're doing some really exciting things. But that's something that you can arrange in most exam rooms. And if your computer doesn't quite make that happen, that might be just a set of screws and some, minimal redesign to make that happen.
I'll jump in and give one that's non-architectural because I'm a recent patient in radiation therapy. And, one thing that I really appreciated is that everything was online. When I got there, they knew who I was just after I told them my first or last name. And everything was just so seamless that I didn't have to worry about giving my name 6 times or giving blood or, giving them my child's social security number. It was so streamlined, and all the results and all activities and scheduling was also online. So it gives the patient choice. And what the patients really want is they want that choice and control back to them because they feel so out of control when they're in that setting. And that's something you can do in a primary care or a specialty office. It can all the way up to a huge hospital facility.
I'll jump on there because my idea was really a sense of ownership in space on whatever scale that can roll out. So, I think about sitting in a plane seat, right? And you kind of you want to acclimate to your new environment and understand what features and also what control you have over it, whether it's the air or, adjusting your seat. So what are those little things in a space where patients and advocates can start to feel like what is their home within that context and how can they control it?
Bringing that back to the OR for a second, when we sort of embedded designers into our ORs and watched, one of the things that they pointed out is that there's no personal space for the people who are working in the operating room, and we all come in with phones and bags and computers and other things that we, take throughout our day and help us do our job, but there's no real place to put it, and it just sort of gets pushed aside with, the day-to-day operations of the operating room, and that in a way, can have a dehumanizing effect on people, and it's something to think about.
Absolutely.
And I think also just like looking for these opportunities with our patient, not focus on the N of 1 and not the N of 1,000. Even with Larique, who we were working with, and when Rob went to his house and saw that ramp, and it was like, this is crazy. And we happened to just be meeting with the mayor of Philadelphia, and Rob's like, hey, mayor, we're working with this patient who he needs a new ramp to his house. And 2 weeks later, he got it. And so just being able to see that was a major impediment in his life, but no one's going to advocate for that patient. And sometimes we're in that right opportunity to do that.
And I think that gives a great idea of, you were saying something really simple. It would be just ask. Patients have a lot of time, and they have a lot of thoughts. And while they're there waiting for a procedure, it might help to just ask them. Question in the back?
My view of waiting rooms, if it's possible, to build community within the waiting room.
Wonderful.
So can there be to create designs that could be interactive so that patients can communicate with each other to form a community.
That's beautiful, Elizabeth. That makes so much sense.
Totally agree. And we're seeing that. They're almost turning into, well, this is a strange analogy, but the new Marriott courtyards that have kind of that family gathering space as you walk in, they have choices. They'll have a community table, they'll have comfortable seating, they'll have food choices. So it gives that chance to break up into little areas of discussion, and so you can have that sense of community and have activities and have technology. So it's a great idea, as opposed to the sterile bus station look. Yeah.
And it's, if you want it, you could also have your private space if you wanted to.
Yes.
I think that's great. That's really,
Yes.
really neat. Great idea.
There's a facility in Dubai that I just saw. It's actually Cleveland Clinic in Dubai, and they have these cocoon chairs. If you want the opposite of community, to be by yourself, and they just envelop you, and you can just go.
But you have the choice. You can turn
Right,
it around.
right.
That's amazing. Well, this has been an incredible panel. Please come and talk to us. I think we're just on this road of discovery right now. But one thought we wanted to leave you with is have a voice. Anything, any design project, any build project that is happening in your community, have a voice, give your thoughts, share your thoughts with all of us, because we need to learn more, to do more, and do better together. Thank you all so much. And thank you to the incredible panel.